All right, hi everyone. Welcome to the Small Ball Podcast. My name is Bill Littler, and thanks for joining for this important podcast. This is probably the most important podcast I'll ever release. But just talk a little bit about it. I just wanted to explain how this is going to work because it's kind of different than other episodes. There won't be an interviewer, but you will see a series of questions on the screen that I'll I'll answer honestly and in my own words. These questions walk through Jill's story, who she was, her lifelong battle with Crohn's disease, how she faced cancer with grace, why the Love Jill Memorial Scholarship exists. So this episode isn't about her illness alone; it's more about who she was, her character, kindness, perseverance, and how she kind of rose above her challenges through life. And uh, that's the type of senior that we're looking for to award this scholarship to. So, thanks for watching, and let's get started. And Jill was defined less by what she did or what her titles were, and more by how she showed up. Her work ethic was just crazy, and it really applied everywhere in anything that she did. I know people with her work they have approached me about how she was, and I always said it where she always set that bar so high, and it made everybody try to keep up with her, and it made you a better person. Yeah, Crohn's became part of Jill's life when she was really young. I think she was diagnosed when she was 15, but I'm sure she battled it a couple years before that. So, um, you know, and back then they didn't really know what Crohn's was. It was a newer disease or not really a lot of information on it. So a lot of the stuff that she went through initially was exploratory. Like they really had no idea what was going on. Um, and she went through a lot of surgeries when she was younger. um, they removed sections of her intestines. Removed, different things that she didn't really need that was diseased. And she was steroid dependent when she was younger. The only thing that seemed to work on her was steroids. And then as she got older, and medicine changed, she started to get on the biological drugs, which, I mean, Crohn's disease is a complicated disease. Everyone's different. There's no unique path to it. And then the biological drugs are the same way. So they're just as complicated. Everyone's different with how they react to it. Some people react well to them, others don't. There's a lot of complications that can come out of those biological drugs. And when it happened with her so early. She was in a lot of the initial phases of these drugs too. So a drug like Remicade right now is a really popular drug, not only for Crohn's but for other things. But she was in one of the original um, trial phases of Remicade when she was younger. And she was always like the pioneer in a lot of these drugs because she was ready and waiting for that next drug because the previous drug wasn't working as well as it could have. So, um, Jill's been through a lot of challenges in her life, and Crohn's disease doesn't go away. It's a chronic illness that stays with you forever, and it pops up whenever it wants to, and there's no rhyme or reason. It just kind of, the symptoms just start happening. And a big part of Jill's life was dealing with all the scar tissue that came with Crohn's. So all the scarring and stuff in her intestines from previous surgeries. When you have a inflammation of Crohn's, it's like it's an open sore, it's open wounds in your intestines. And then after it settles down and heals, of course, it's scars. And over time, when you have a lot of scarring, that's when you start getting strictures in your intestines. So a lot of once she got into those biological drugs and they found drugs that actually helped her, kept the Crohn's in remission, she still had to deal with all of the previous surgeries and all the scarring and stuff from the years of active Crohn's. So, a lot of her struggles and a big part of her life was indeed the the tissue, scarring tissue, and everything. So she's had surgeries to clean that up, and yeah, I mean, it's Crohn's is crazy, man. Crohn's is a really tough disease, and it's like our normal days where we're 100% healthy. I don't think she's ever had those days. She always woke up with concerns or maybe not feeling right. She would eat something that would bother her for days. She had to. There's times when she drove home from Harrisburg and had to stop at every rest area. And people don't realize just what she went through from a day-to-day perspective, just because she was so private and she kept stuff away from everybody. I've seen her in some of her darkest moments, and her strength is just unbelievable with someone who was able to deal with what she dealt with Crohn's, and still was as successful as she was, not only with her work, but just friendships, a wife, a mother, just her ability to kind of rise above what Crohn's gave her on a day-to-day basis, and she was still able to be as good as she was. It shaped her toughness and her ability to adapt to something like cancer. You know, um, she's never bitter. She was never bitter of what she had to deal with. She never felt sorry for herself, or she never used it as an excuse. There was times I know before her last surgery, they wanted to add a couple pounds to her, and she had to carry around she had to eat through a IV, a TPN they call it, and it was something you did at home, and she would get her TPN ready, and it was just it was a large bag of it was like white fluid with a lot of all the nutrients and stuff that you need, and it went through a port that she had in her chest, and she would get it ready, turn it on, put it. They had a backpack for it. She would throw her backpack over her shoulder, and she would go off to cheer practice, and didn't use it as an excuse. Didn't sit at home feel sorry for herself. It was just something that she did. She knew she needed to do it, and she wasn't allowing it to stop her life. And that's just how she was. And you know, it made her stronger mentally than most people, just because it it made her, like, she had a choice. She could have just laid around and felt sorry for herself and not did anything, or she can make the best life that she can make dealing with a disease like Crohn's. And she chose the latter. Yeah, what people didn't see was how much effort it took for Jill just to feel normal. Um, she, I mean, Crohn's impacted her in ways that I don't think people truly understand, unless you have the Crohn's, or you know someone who lives with Crohn's. You're fatigued. I mean, you can't eat as well as others, so you're fatigued from that. You deal with, sometimes you deal with pain. If Crohn's is active, you deal with a lot of pain, because of the surgeries and everything. Her gut is smaller, her intestinal path is smaller, so absorption isn't as good as a healthy person. So she has to take more supplements. She was taking probably 2 dozen pills a day, just to keep up with the nutrients that we would get, a normal person would get from eating. Um, you know, um, and she never complained about it. She always just kind of did it. There's things we had to plan around all the time. Um, you know, her everyday life. Sometimes she would eat something that her body didn't agree with, and it would make things challenging. If we were traveling a lot, she had to be careful eating at restaurants. A lot of times we would, um, you know, rent or go somewhere that had a kitchen so we can cook our own stuff, because we know it's a little bit better eating things that she's comfortable with or that she knows she can tolerate, instead of going to a restaurant and not knowing. You know, we would go to a restaurant sometimes and eat, take a chance, and sometimes it was great. Sometimes she had troubles, and she would come home not feeling well, or having to go to the bathroom frequently. Um, and we just kind of, I personally, I would just kind of roll with her. So whatever she wanted to do, we would typically do, and we just kind of rolled with what she felt comfortable with doing, and I was fine with that, because I know that I could do more things than she can. So she kind of set the pace, and I would just kind of tag along, and yeah, and there's a lot of times when she protected others from worrying. She never wanted anyone to know when she was dealing with stuff. I know that when we first got together, she was like that with me, and I'd always tell her, I'm like, why do you keep this stuff from me? There were times when she would be sick and she wouldn't say anything to me until I noticed, which could have been days, maybe even weeks in some cases. And I'm like, look, don't do that, and she started to not do that with me after several years of being married and living with her every day. And she would be open with me about everything, and tell me and I'd always ask her. Sometimes she would tell me I drove her crazy because I'd always ask her how she felt and stuff. Um, but it took a lot of strength to do what she did, uh, dealing with what she dealt with, and and a lot of people, she didn't let people know how she was, and sometimes she would smile through with whatever she was dealing with when she was talking with friends or with her coworkers, and she would do things just because she didn't want it to slow her down, and it just kind of defines who she was. And a lot of people really had no idea what she went through, even close people. Ooh, this is a tough one. I think Jill deep down always knew that she was going to eventually get cancer. Um, I know that if you watch late night TV and you see these commercials of these biological drugs, all the fine print kind of tells you that it increases your chance of cancer, and I think she knew that. And Crohn's itself isn't a lethal disease, but a lot of times the drugs that treat it, open up doors for potential problems. So the doctors always told her that Crohn's isn't going to get you; it's going to be something else. And for whatever reason, she always thought it was. I believe she always thought it was going to be cancer. Um, and when she was first diagnosed with it, I mean, it was very an emotional moment. Um, but it was something that she didn't. It didn't like it. It obviously it bothered her, of course. And I know she's scared of cancer. She was always scared of cancer. But it was like, okay, what are we doing next? It didn't didn't make her didn't stop her from doing anything, and she was very gung ho on attacking this and getting it treated as quickly as we could. The surgery itself wasn't easy, um, but there was no other option. So they did what they had to do with the surgery, and she come out of the surgery. Um, it really impacted our lives, but she dealt with it. There's a lot of things that she had to deal with through the surgery and the recovery of the surgery. But, she just kept on rolling with it. And, going to appointments, we would go together most of the time. I always wanted to go, but I couldn't go all the time. So I had, we had friends and relatives, like her mother and even my daughters or our daughters would take her to the appointments, or but the treatments anyway. But I always wanted to be there, and it was hard for me not to go, just because I know she felt comfortable with me being there with her. Um, a lot of it is just the reassurance. I think my presence helped calm her down in certain situations. Um, I knew her inside and out, so I would know what would bother her mentally and what wouldn't. So if I heard something or saw something, I would just make sure that I was there beside her. Um, and it was it was scary. It was really scary. The whole experience with cancer, and I know anyone who's been through cancer can know. You know, chemotherapy is no joke. Radiation, no joke. But she faced it like it was nothing. She would go into these treatments and it wasn't a big deal. She formed an abscess after the surgery. During the healing process. She formed an abscess, and we went to the ER. She spiked a fever. We went to the ER. They took care of it. They admitted her for a couple days. Not a big deal. She came home. She took her treatments when she was in the hospital. She came home, and we moved to the next step. And that's really how she dealt with all of her medical challenges throughout her life. She just faced them and dealt with it. And she just had this quiet strength about her. Um, and she never panicked. I know she probably felt panicked inside sometimes, but for the most part, she was strong. And, I always knew when she was a little bit bothered by something, because she would want to hold my hand, or just kind of looked at me. And I always knew when she needed that extra support. Otherwise, she handled it all herself. And it's pretty amazing how strong she was when it came to her medical challenges. And even through all of that, she still wanted to protect us. Yeah, she's just very unique when it came to that stuff, really. And the cancer diagnosis did scare her. It did scared us. You know, and but she, like I said, she after the initial shock, it was like anything else. Let's get scheduled. Let's get us on the show. Let's get moving. Let's get doing this. We got something to fight here. Let's get it done. So, but that's who she was. Jill, even on her hardest days, um, Jill was thinking about other people. I know there was times um, when we were younger in our marriage, she would be hospitalized, and this is back when they don't do it as much now, but you had roommates in your hospital room. You had two beds in there, and she would always be that person who would help the other roommate. She would, no matter how sick she was, she would, if someone was having trouble, she would call the nurse for him, or kind of take care of him in some way. I always remember her doing that. And that just kind of shows you how she was. All the nurses loved her. I'm proud of walking the halls of those hospitals, because everybody knew that I was Jill's husband, and everyone just, for some reason, they just kind of just appreciated her more than others. She wasn't a very demanding patient. She was very patient. She was very understanding. And no matter how sick she was, she always found a way to just be a good person, and not take her frustrations out on anybody, Nothing like that. Even at home, she was just someone who just did that. Yeah, Jill, she was always, calm and compassionate. Like she was never angry or bitter. Um, even even when we would get into our battles when we were younger, we were one of our biggest argument points when we were younger is with any couple is finances. So when we were, making ends meet, living paycheck to paycheck when we first started getting married, um, we would have our disagreements. But she would just ignore me. I'd be the one who would flip off the end and, get mad and start yelling and screaming and stuff. And she would just ignore me. And she didn't want to deal with it. That's just how it was. And in some ways it made me worse because I wanted a response from her, but she never gave in. So a lot of times I just had to walk away and just deal with it myself because she didn't want any of my BS at the time. Um, but that's just how she was. And, just like I said, just an overall good person, and people around her, no matter what the setting, instantly knew that she was somebody warm and approachable and just a kind, generous person. And I didn't want the last chapter of Jill's story to be about cancer. Um, you know, she didn't deserve that to be her last chapter of her life. And that's really one of the reasons why I started this scholarship, is because I want her name to live on, not because of the cancer or even the Crohn's, but because of who she was. She was such a uh, unique person that, I feel that she deserves to be living forever in some way. And yeah, and I don't know. I mean, that's really what I wanted to do with the scholarship, was just to make sure everybody knew just how good of a person that she was. And yeah, I just want everyone to realize, the love, her work, and kindness that she gave every day, regardless of what she was dealing with. Um, I just didn't want cancer to be the last chapter of her story. I want the girls who are applying for this to understand the importance of um, this scholarship and what it means to be a good person, and to do the right thing silently. She always did that with our daughter Macy. It was more important how she acted on the field, and how she acted towards her teammates was more important to her than actually what Macy did on the field. There's a lot of times when we would see players that just had a bad attitude, or just didn't act right. And Jill would always, whisper in my ear how bad that was, or that looks terrible. And Macy learned at an early age that it was very important to us that she carried herself well in the field. So she's not the type to throw equipment, or act out in a negative way, or do something that draws attention to her. That was something that Jill, it was important to her, as a player, to make sure that you're doing the right thing. You're a good teammate. You're a good player. You're respectful. That kind of thing. It's important. Helping others when no one's watching. You know, um, some of the things that made us feel good as parents is watching our daughter. If a teammate, I remember one time a teammate made 2 errors in the same inning, and she made it a point to run over to her, um, after that second error, and she gave her a high five. And it wasn't like Macy says much to people, because she's another quiet one. But those types of actions are important and more important to Jill. I think that made her more proud by watching Macy lift up her teammates more so than watching her go 3 for 3. That's just how Jill was. And that's kind of what I want this scholarship to be about, is that, you girls, character matters a lot, and your work ethic and how you treat others and all that is important for this scholarship. So as this episode's released, the Love Jill Memorial Scholarship application will be open. The scholarship is meant for graduating softball players who value character, kindness, and perseverance, the same qualities Jill lived by every day. If that resonates with you, and you're a senior in Beaver County, I encourage you to apply and share your story with us. What we're going to do is we're going to collect these applications, and we have a board of 4 people. So we have both of my daughters, Jill's mom, and one of Jill's close friends will be reviewing these applications, and we'll use a scoring system or a point system to determine the winner. And I'm going to be involved in the application process, but I don't have a vote. I didn't feel like I should vote just because, I kind of interviewing these girls, a lot of them, I kind of know their story already. So I really didn't feel like I should be involved in that. But, it's interesting for me. I'm excited about this. I love the fact that I'm doing it to honor my wife. I'm not so sure she would like all the attention, but she deserves it. And it's something that's going to help me continue her story, even after she passed. And it's special to me, and I'm glad everyone really seems to embrace this. Family, friends, softball players, the community. It's pretty important for me, and I'm very excited how everyone is embracing it, and they appreciate how important it is to me. And I'm glad to be able to be in a situation where I can give back to the softball community that's been good to my family for all these years. And to give back to girls. I feel like in sports anyway, girls kind of get the short end of the stick. And that's always been the reason why I had this network, is because I wanted to give girls in sports, or in softball at least, a stage to have that they typically don't have. But in some cases, the boys do. So that's kind of like what the whole idea behind this network is. And the scholarship was just something to, it just fit. It was convenient and fit. After my wife passed, it was just a perfect scenario, I feel, for the scholarship. And I'm more than happy to have this, and I know she would be excited as well, to give an opportunity for girls in our area, in this to give to them, and acknowledge their work ethic, their how they are on the field, off the field, the type of people they are, their character, kindness, perseverance, all those things that made Jill who Jill was. So thank you for being here, and for honoring Jill's legacy with me. And good luck to all the seniors out there who's going to apply for the Love Jill Memorial Scholarship. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.